the sort of the flip side of Republicans pretending that getting rid of Roe v. Wade is not going to impact anything that's going on. They are now trying to create this sort of like boogeyman of the attempt to legislate a version of Roe v. Wade, essentially, would, I don't know, create some new wild hyper version of abortion that that they say is not status quo.
Yeah, and I mean it's kind of a funny. It's not. I mean, it's not funny, but the move they did was they have been restricting it in these ways for so long that they can say establishing through legislation an unrestricted right to abortion would, well, that's not the status quo because we've done all these things in all these areas and all these states and all these regions where access is restricted in all these ways. But I mean, you know, they can't quite come up with, I don't think, a coherent, like what the bad case scenario is of just sort of enshrining the right in law. So it's really just saying like, well, you know, there, as you say, it would just be extra. It would be abortion plus. It would just be extra abortion if we did this, because they don't actually have a coherent justification.
They don't seem to be like almost like mentally prepared for this moment, and they don't seem to have a coherent plan on how to address it.
Well, the funny thing is that's true on both sides, isn't it?
Right. Yes.
Like and I think like a lot of left of center observers and legal experts could have told you this was coming. And yet, you know, the White House didn't seem to have anything ready, and you know, Democrats in Congress kind of scrambled on this, but Republicans are. It's an overused cliche, but a lot of them are, you know, the dogs who caught the car here, right. and I think a lot of them are basically in the same position as John Roberts right now, right? Like that's what's happening here is that John Roberts is trying to pump the brakes, but then the people, you know, the actual people in charge are like, oh, we have enough power to do this now, so we're just going to do it.
And it feels like this is just, you know, once they walk through, once they cross this Rubicon, I guess, all bets are off. I mean, right? Like there's no inhibition. There's no inhibition once they get rid of a 50-year right, which I think is really, honestly, is unprecedented. I mean, we've had like sort of, you know, we've had some rollbacks when you look at like things like Reconstruction and whatnot, but there were loopholes built into that. And this is just a wholesale reversal of an individual right that women have had in this country for 50 years, and it's going to be rolled back. What, you know, how do there's no, once they've done that, there doesn't seem to be any limiting principle on anything that they want to roll back. Marriage equality. Yeah. And I don't know, the right to be gay. I mean, anything.
And I think Alito, assuming his draft opinion resembles the final thing, Alito is hinting at all of that. And I wrote last week about how one of the things hobbling the Democratic Party is that it's led by institutionalists who essentially believe in the legitimacy of these institutions, like the Supreme Court and like the U.S. Senate. And people with that mindset, I think, in this era, just can't actually accept reality. They can't accept the reality that these rights are not just like under threat, but like they could disappear in a week. There's just nothing stopping that from happening. And so I think because I think a lot of these older political leaders have this fundamental belief that everything will just work out fine over the long term. They actually are not, they're not prepared whatsoever for the reality you describe, in which a hardcore right-wing majority on the court can roll back not just Roe v. Wade, but anything they want, and they want to roll back a lot.
I mean, even enough to the fact that they don't discipline their own members enough to not be anti-abortion. I mean, like, maybe this is an easy way to talk about Pelosi and Henry Cuellar. Let's
play this clip. I mean, this is I mean, I understand what's going on here, but it just seems to be absolutely wrong. And we should just say Nancy Pelosi is not the only member of the Democratic leadership. Clyburn, they're all on board with not just, endorsing the reelection of Cuellar, but they're providing money and funds. And remember, this is not just that he's not anti-abortion. These guys being investigated by the FBI. So there's a lot of outs here for them. But here's Nancy Pelosi at a press conference.
I'm wondering why you're supporting Henry Cuellar in his Texas runoff. You have long maintained that House members should have the highest ethical standards, but he had his house, as you know, raided by the FBI just several weeks ago.
Well, let me just thank you for the question. I'm supporting Henry Cuellar. He's a valued member of our caucus. The FBI has said he is not under investigation, and so it's up to his constituents to make the decision to send him to Congress. I thought you were going to take it to choice or something. He is not pro-choice, but we didn't need him. We passed the bill with what we had. And by the way, this is
I mean, when she says he's not under target of federal investigation, that's what his attorney told CBS News a few weeks ago. So, I mean, I don't, not sure if that's the case, but that's according to his attorney that she said, claiming that.
But let's talk about his position on abortion, because I mean, I get what she's saying here. We don't need his vote for this, and we need him to maintain the majority because maybe she thinks that Jennifer Cisneros can't win in that district.
Jessica,
excuse me. Cisneros can't win in that district. But isn't there like just a fundamental, and I don't know, I guess that's debatable, but isn't there just a fundamental misunderstanding of like how it is impossible to message what should be, right now a huge opportunity for Democrats to save, their November from being a total disaster?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there is, so, we've seen over the last few years the difficulty Democrats have had just sort of painting the Republicans and conservatives as extremist in a way that sticks with the voters. And I think I literally just saw some poll that was like, people think that, Democrats have gotten more extreme than Republicans or something like that. But like, one of the issues is that they, Pelosi, in order to maintain her majority, is like, all right, turns out being anti-abortion is okay in certain circumstances. And, we'll also, go on a panel and be like, what we need is a strong and reasonable Republican Party back. And it's just, it's incoherent because Americans are, I mean, you saw the dive bomb the Supreme Court took in its own polling of its own legitimacy. But I don't know how you can capitalize on that. I mean, how can you capitalize on that if you are not, at the very least, saying Cuellar, not going to bat for it, right? Like, I think that would be the line to actually straddle here. If you believed, as I'm sure Pelosi believes, that Cuellar is more electable than Cisneros. But you don't have to go to bat for it. That's where it seems to me that they're just completely getting in their own way.
Absolutely. I mean, what position would you have to not be eligible for support from Democratic leadership? What position would you have to have? Honestly, I would want, I can't come up with one.
But not on the right. There are no right-wing ones. There are left-wing ones you can't have. But yes.
Yes. I mean, honestly, like what is the point? This is pretty low-hanging fruit. This is like, we want to, deliver a message that's pretty straightforward, and they're stepping all over any of their messaging. I mean, it's fascinating. It sort of reminds me. And look, I get the idea that we want to hold the House, but the fact is that the name of the game right now is the Senate. It doesn't matter holding the House. Like, I can understand why they say we need Joe Manchin, because stuff is happening in the Senate. We are, at least getting judges on there. And at least, in the event that the Supreme Court, somebody gets hit by a bus, I think, let me just quote you, and I always appreciate when people say stuff like this. The commitment to our existing institutions means they can't credibly claim to have an answer to this moment. Quote, give us another majority and hope Clarence Thomas dies is a best case scenario, but not exactly a sales pitch. But, I mean, at the very least, there's an opportunity. That's why the Senate is the whole game. The House isn't doing anything now. And it's like, I understand that Nancy Pelosi still wants to be leader, but you're stepping all over the ability for the Democrats long term to do anything. And
look, this is what seeing your job as incumbency protection gets you, because you absolutely do not actually end up working for the best interests of your party. You end up working for the best interests of your individual members, and that can be very different. That can be a very different thing. And I think one of the really frustrating things about the Democrats, and especially it's so funny. This is always a criticism from the left. It's always a criticism from the left, from people who are like, I hate the Democrats. Because one of the things that frustrates them is that Democrats don't actually seem to want to fight to win power for themselves, right? Like they want to maintain Nancy Pelosi's leadership. They want to maintain Cuellar's seat. They do not want to advance the interests of what is called the Democratic Party. And at least that's how it seems to a lot of people. And it's like, the longer you pay attention to this stuff, the weirder and more frustrating that is.
It is the closest thing I can analogize it to is the Red Sox prior to 2004. Like, they were so interested in we just need to make it to the playoffs. And so they would have a team that they knew could not win in the playoffs, but they just needed to get there, essentially.
The Minnesota Vikings too.
And so they would they would never take the risk associated with, or make the investment that's associated with actually winning in a big, big way. So Nancy Pelosi is sitting there looking at the numbers and going, okay, the way that we can hold the House is, one seat is going to make a big difference, and it very well may. And the calculation is that Jessica Cisneros could not win, but I'm sorry, you're hurting every other person.
And frankly,
running.
the calculation and the initial premise is wrong, because even if they want to quibble with the FBI he was still raided by the FBI. He was still. You think in a general election that's not going to be used against him? I mean, come on.
And it's the other part of that too, is the common moderate Democrat candidate or congressperson thing of like running off to give an interview to Politico saying our party, the party I belong to, the party that I am running on the ballot line of, is out of control on these left-wing defund the police stuff, which is like, just in terms of game theory, it's like each one of these Congress people and candidates is allowed to hurt the party's brand as a whole in service of their own election by defining themselves as against the party.
Right.
And in the aggregate, what does that do? It just drives home this idea that the Democratic Party is extreme left wing, out of touch. It's completely insane, but it's like not only allowed, it seems to be like an official position that you are allowed to take. And it, as you say, like, if you look at it from the perspective of each individual race, yeah, it makes sense for each individual candidate to define themselves in contrast to their party. And then when all of them do it, well, suddenly, why would anyone want the Democrats to be in charge of anything?
And the pitch, I mean, they're going to be successful at this pitch of like, you know, rolling back Roe v. Wade is actually the way to maintain the status quo in terms of abortions. And what the Democrats want to do is an extreme furtherance. And that's going to seem somewhat reasonable to a public that is like, you know, always half or, you know, 1/4 or 1/8 paying attention, because being against abortion definitionally can't be so extreme that it couldn't allow you to be in the get support from the top echelons of the Democratic Party. I mean, it's nuts. It's nuts.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I think too, Pelosi saying like, well, you know, he may be, I mean, so look, we talk about how old the leadership is, and this is a reflection of, I think, a sort of belief among people of that political generation that Roe v. Wade, because it was settled policy, meant that you could indulge the occasional Catholic, rhetorically anti-abortion candidate. And that was fine to win those voters in districts where that was necessary, because they could say, oh, I'm personally against abortion, and you would know, but don't worry, that's settled law, so it doesn't matter. That's not the world we're living in. And that has not hit home with the leadership of the party. That this is real, it is happening, the restrictions will be real, it will be outlawed, people will be prosecuted, it's all actually happening.
She, in 2017, told the Washington Post that abortion is, quote, kind of fading as an issue. It really is. That's what she said in 2017.
Jesus.
Like, talk about a
I didn't remember that one.
Yeah, I mean, I've been pulling up this article, I think, once a day to talk about this on the show. Because, I mean, doesn't that say everything there? Why they were so ill prepared for this moment? They took it for granted. And at the same time, this like archaic leadership perceives abortion as such a sticky issue. It's so, you know, we don't want to even say the word, right? They're still operating in this Reagan Democrat mindset that they're completely disarmed when the most predictable thing ever happens. This was the number one consequence, and the stakes were when we were talking about the Supreme Court fight and why Obama's nominee, Merrick Garland, was being held up. This was what we were fearful of, the consequences of this. And yet there's still, I mean, around that same time, that's 2017. She's making this, I mean, it was right after that. She's making this case. It's unbelievable.
They don't take the right seriously. I mean, they don't, like, they just do not believe, because the Republicans that they interact with are of the suit-wearing professional types, and the suit-wearing professional types are the real psychos, frankly. But they don't take them seriously. They don't think they mean what they say. They literally don't think they mean what they say, because if they meant what they said, then we'd be in really bad trouble, and we can't be in bad trouble, because then we would have to do something.
Yeah.
You know, this it is. I don't know. Maybe it makes more sense in this other circumstance, but we had a similar sort of dynamic. I was listening to Biden gave, I guess, prepared remarks to an international summit on COVID, fighting COVID, and he's saying like, now is the time to start with this. You know, I just played a clip of Sean Hannity, who was mocking Janet Yellen for talking about the economic impact of Roe v. Wade. You know, obviously, it's going to limit women's ability to pursue careers in some instances. It is going to put a lot of kids into poverty. It is going to, and we will see that on a macro level. But then the other thing that Hannity says is that, and like, a Roe v. Wade's not gonna ban abortion. It's like pretending like it's gonna have no impact. What's going on? Because he's not the only person to do this.
Yeah, what's going on is, and I actually, I just, in a collaboration with my friend Libby Watson, who writes the newsletter Sick Note, we just interviewed someone who recently went to go work for an abortion provider. That's not up yet, but it'll be up in my newsletter later today. And what's going on is that because the consequences of this will be, I think, fairly dire for a lot of people, unequally felt. It's sort of dependent on people like Hannity to just straight up deny reality, with the hope that the majority of his audience will not experience the bad things to come. And the cable news' audience is pretty old.
Right.
Fox News' audience is pretty old. And I would imagine demographically, they also are more likely to be fairly well off. So even if they do reside in these conservative places where the Roe v. Wade ending will have immediate consequences, even if they reside in those places, there's not the demographic that will bear the burden of what is to come immediately. And so you can just lie to them. I mean, you can just lie to them.
Yeah, there's also this conservative impulse, I think, that is, it's easy for hosts like Hannity to feed into it. And it's to decry the radical left as hysterical and as over-emotional. Think of Trump derangement syndrome. Everything has a problem, right? Not, there's this impulse, I think, from a conservative audience's standpoint, to feel okay, to feel like their society is organized in the exact right way, and there's no problem here, and so that it's like a cozy bedtime story, and I think like that's primarily what a lot of conservative hosts are feeding into right now.
Totally.
I hadn't thought that they, it hadn't occurred to me that they are that sort of aware that like their audience is just not going to feel the impact of it. I mean, I guess maybe they would have, possibly like their kids might be stuck here, but also, and maybe they're just sort of like, sort of stepping up on things, because I think it seems to me inevitable, if the Republicans control all three branches of our government, that they're going to ban abortion across the board. I mean, they're gonna push a federal ban. It seems to me quite obvious. I know that McConnell said we wouldn't get rid of the filibuster, but I don't believe that for a minute. I think he'll be pressured into it because their losses would be devastating if they didn't, it seems to me. And the flip side of that is I think it was, I can't remember who it was that was on the Senate floor talking about why the Republicans voted against, McConnell, I think, said the same thing, why they voted against the protect abortion bill that came up onto the Senate floor. But they claim that the bill itself went way beyond where we are today. And, introducing some other type of, like, I don't know, double abortion or hyper abortion, like what, like they've had to create some other villain besides abortion, because I just don't think that it's even close to sinking into the American public what is about to happen.